Hey guys, today we're going to be doing our first lesson of what is slope-intercept form. Just as a reminder, you should have your note sheet up on Google Classroom, Google Docs, or have it printed out so that you are able to fill it in as we go along with the video. So, first thing is, what is slope-intercept form? And whenever you are talking about a linear relationship, it's always going to be in the form y equals mx plus b. So this is every general linear equation. It is in this form, where the m in your equation stands for your slope, and the b in your equation stands for your y-intercept. The slope of a line is how steep the line is, and the y-intercept is the point that where the equation of the line crosses the y-axis. And whenever the line crosses the y-axis, that point that falls on that line will always be 0, a number. And if you think about it, here is your coordinate grid. All of these points that is vertical, this is your y-axis and your x-axis. And if the y-axis is the point that crosses the y-axis, your point is not moving left or right first, which is why the 0 is in the point for your x-coordinate, and your y-coordinate will be the point of how many you go up or you go down. The x and the y in your equation are just your variables that you will use to evaluate a situation when you're using your equation. So let's start looking at some examples. So example number 1. If you have the equation y equals 7x plus 6, your slope is always the coefficient of x, or the number that is being multiplied by x in your equation. So in this case, the 7 is your slope, and the 6 is your y-intercept, or your b value in this case. And whenever you label your number, remember, you're going to write it as 0, 6. Your slope is always going to be a ratio, and slope is the rise over run, meaning the steepness of your line. So when you have your slope of 7, remember, any number can be written as a fraction over 1. And it still represents itself. So in this case, your slope is you went up 7 points and you went to the right 1 point. That would be your slope of this line. All right, let's look at another example. Example number 2. Y equals negative 1/4 x plus 3. See if you can identify the slope and y-intercept of this line. What does m equal and what does b equal? Remember, your slope is always the number being multiplied by x, or your coefficient of the variable x. So your slope is negative 1/4, and your y-intercept would be 3. All right, example number 3. Y equals x minus 2. If there is no number in front of x, it is understood that that number would be 1. So what I always want you to recommend doing is always put a 1 in front of your x, so you remember that your slope is actually 1. You can also say 1 over 1 if you want to put as a ratio, a fraction. And your y-intercept is 0, negative 2 in this case. So the line is crossing the y-axis at negative 2. Now, example number 4 is going to look a little bit different. So, y plus 2x equals 9. In this case, it's not in the form y equals mx plus b. The reason why is that on the left side of your equal sign, you have the plus 2x there. And in order to identify your slope and y-intercept, it must be in the form of y equals mx plus b. Therefore, if you want to identify your slope and y-intercept, you need to be able to rearrange your equation so that the y is isolated on the left side. So in order to balance your equation, to bring it to the other side of your equal sign, subtract 2x from both sides. The 2x's will cancel on the left, and you're left with y equals, now don't forget, these are not like terms, because they do not have a variable x in both of their terms. So you cannot combine them. So y equals negative 2x plus 9. This 9 is a positive 9. Now you can identify your slope and your y-intercept. Notice how your slope is negative 2 now and not positive 2. Because since you brought it to the other side, your slope became negative. All right, finally, example number 5. Negative y equals 6x plus 8. Now you might think that this is in slope-intercept form because of the x's and your slope and y-intercept are on the right side. However, your y is not isolated. And the reason why the y is not isolated is if you look at all the other examples, this y has a positive 1 in front every time. Here we have a negative 1. It's saying negative 1 times y. So the opposite of multiplying by negative 1 would be to divide every part by negative 1. Therefore, your y is isolated and it's a positive 1. 6 divided by negative 1 is negative 6x. 8 divided by negative 1 is negative 8. Now you can identify your slope and your y-intercept. Your slope would be negative 6 over 1. And your y-intercept is 0, negative 9. Negative 8. Okay, so now that we've looked at how to identify your slope and y-intercept and how to rearrange your equations into slope-intercept form, let's look at some examples of a graph. So if this is a graph and you want to identify the slope, the y-intercept, and the equation of the line, the first thing you always have to do is identify the slope. And remember, your slope is your rise over run in this case. So rise over run, you want to pick a point that goes through the 4 little boxes. So for example, this point would be good, and this point would be good because it's going right through the 4 little boxes. And when you find the slope of a line, you want to go up or down first from a point and then go left or right. So if I start from the bottom point, I'm going to rise 2 units. So I went up 2 units. And then I ran to the left 1 unit. And whenever you go to the left or you go down, it's going to be a negative number. So in this case, our slope is 2 over negative 1. Now let's say you wanted to go the opposite way and start at the top point. You would fall 2, which is negative 2, and you go to the right 1. So your slope also could be negative 2 over positive 1. And either of these, if you were to simplify it back down, would give you a slope of negative 2. Your y-intercept is the point on the y-axis where the line crosses the y-axis. So in that case, your slope was right here, and that point was 0, 2. So now that you have your slope and your y-intercept, let's put these two components together to make our equation. So y equals negative 2x plus 2. Remember, your slope's your m, your y-intercept is your b. Now, in order to determine if this line is increasing or decreasing, you read a graph the same way you read a book. You read it by going from left to right. Okay? So if you're looking at the line, the graph, you want to go from the left side, and as you go from left to right, your line is decreasing. So in this case, you're going to have a decreasing line because reading it from left to right, it's going down. Compared to if you look at graph B now, start on your left side, and as you go to the right, it is increasing, or it's going up in that case. Let's see if you can find the slope and the y-intercept in the equation of this line now. So you have your point right here, which is on the y-axis. So we actually can identify our y-axis as 0, negative 3 right off the bat. Find another point that goes through the 4 little boxes on your graph. So this one would be okay. This one. Any of these points would be fine. So if I want to go from this point to this point, I would rise 1, so that's plus 1. And I would go to the right 1. So our slope would be 1 over 1 or just 1. But let's say you didn't see that first point and you want to go to this point here. you would rise 1, 2, 3, so that's plus 3, and then to the right 3 as well. And if you simplify 3 over 3, that also will give you a positive 1. So our slope, it doesn't matter which points you choose. As long as you simplify your slope, your ratio, it will give you the same answer in this case. So now our equation would be y equals 1x minus 3. Now, another way to determine if your line is increasing or decreasing is not just by looking at the graph, but also looking at your slope. If you notice, on the decreasing graph, your slope was negative. And if you look at the graph that was increasing, your slope was positive. Okay, so now that you learned more about slope-intercept form in lesson number 1, why don't you now go and complete your individual practice? You can refer back to this video in your notes as you are completing your independent practice. Make sure you also ask questions if you are unsure about anything. And after your independent practice, you are to submit it and then work on the Google form as a quiz grade.